Okay. Yes, tonight I thought of touching on a topic that's associated with the uh, figure of goddess Tara in Tibetan Buddhism. Tara is a very popular deity uh, that people worship, and there are so many legends associated with that. But one of which is that Tara is born from the tears of Avalokiteshvara. So I'm moving to legend, to story, to philosophy, okay? So one of the legends is that Tara is born out of the tears of Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara worked so hard, that's the Buddha of compassion, worked so hard relieving sentient beings one after the other. But there doesn't seem to be any end to the sentient beings. Sentient beings keep coming, keep coming, keep coming. And that overwhelmed, almost like overwhelmed him, which triggered him to shed tear. And that tear crystallized into Goddess Tara. And in that respect, Goddess Tara is considered the synthesis of all the Buddha's mind infused with love and compassion, all the Buddha's knowledge that pervades all phenomena, and all the Buddha's power or the capacity of benefiting others, the enlightened activity through their activity of body, speech and mind, but more particularly of the speech, but in certain cases through their bodily manifestations also. So there are many manifestations of Tara. In the Tibetan community, it's a very, very popular practice. Just about all the householders know any version, any one or many versions of the prayers to Tara. The most popular is the praise of 21 Taras. There are 21 stanzas, each in praise of one particular manifestation of Tara out of the 21. But then there are even more condensed verses, maybe just one verse of praise that goes to all the Taras. So Tibetans, monastic, non-monastic, all would know these prayers by heart. And in their times of difficulty, out of faith, they would invoke Tara through these prayers. At the very least, they believe. At the very least, through these practices, it what you call brings in a sense of confidence, a sense of relief in them. And then there are accounts, maybe legendary or otherwise, accounts of how people have been protected by Tara in their times of difficulty. So, irrespective of whether these accounts are factual or not, they have a special teaching to connect us to our own spiritual practice. So it is in that light that we come across what is called two sets of threats, two sets of fears or threats that we come across in our life, and the legends are associated with such threats of how calling on Tara has helped them. But very more important, interesting thing is that of these two sets of threats, one is internal, another is external. So each internal threat that we need to recognize as threat, very often we kind of overlook them as threat. Sometimes we may even take help in them, or kind of look at them as helps to seek out, rather than as threats, where in actuality they may be actual threats to our own inner peace, inner joy, inner welfare. So anyhow, we may or may not agree with all of these considered as threats or whatnot, but I'll just relate this in accordance with how it is mentioned in the texts, and also deal with their corresponding physical counterparts, physical threats. So threats to our internal welfare and external welfare, physical welfare. So it would be, yeah, the piece that I have taken out is a piece written by the first Dalai Lama in praise of Tara. In the course of praising Tara, it deals with Tara's protective power, and it's in that regard that these 8 threats, 2 sets of 8 threats, are dealt with even accounts of how Tara did come to help to people. So partly it will be story, partly it will have a special practical message for us. So each of the individual threads within those 2 sets are paired up. The first comes, I'll go straight for the interest of time. The first is arrogance. Arrogance is paired up with the physical. Arrogance is the inner threat to our welfare, our inner welfare, and it is paired up with the physical threat of a lion-like image that could hamper our physical welfare. Just as lions dwell in hills and mountains, kind of seek shelter under some covers, yet at the same time they're filled with a sense of arrogance. The lions actually may or may not be that arrogant, but somehow that's how people have been associating it with, right? But looking at how they act, they do seem like, I am the king, how dare you, right? So, and there are so many stories associated with that, right? Anyhow, yeah, so they say that physically they may kind of seek refuge under some kind of a cover, yet at the same time they are disturbed by this sense of I, ego, like I am better than others. And that that sense of being superior to others kind of makes them mistreat others, not with respect, and kind of even look down upon others, whatnot. So looking down upon others, filled with arrogance, whatnot, one has to be very in areas that may be infested with lions or whatnot, for they may be a danger to our physical welfare. Likewise, anger, likewise arrogance, it's something that we need to watch out against, because by the very nature of arrogance, it is rooted in a miscalculation or over-exaggeration of one's capacities. It is, when we speak of arrogance, although it may be a little difficult to kind of tell sense of confidence, pride, from that of arrogance, but what it is essentially is, unlike confidence or well-informed confidence, well-informed pride, arrogance as such is considered to be to be an overestimation of one's own position, one's own role, or one's own capacity. And because of that, that kind of over-exaggeration, when one is carried away by it, that can blind us to the factual situation, and under its influence, it can make us behave disconcordantly. So, so here says that there once, even in the text itself, it says there once such thing happened. So what it is warning us against is our internal threat to our internal welfare of this tendency of being egoistic and arrogant, for it is built from an overestimation of who we are in relation to others. Actually, this is the truth also, because very often we feel like, oh, why not someone would be arrogant because they have achieved this and this and this. Because in the wake of arrogance, they kind of overestimate their achievement, their role in that particular achievement, and then look down upon others. Whereas in reality, whatever achievement it may be, even spiritual, mundane, super mundane, spiritual, worldly, whatever it may be, it would have to come through the participation of others, irrespective. That's for sure. So then, where is the ground for dwelling in that kind of a self-elevation at the expense of others? So here it recounts an account saying once someone went to gather trees, wood. That's the case in India, even today. Whereas here, in the forest, in the parks, lots of logs of wood are left there. If you were in India, none of that would be remaining any longer than a day. So people, someone went out to gather wood, and then suddenly a hungry tigress came out. And hungry as she was, she reached out for the person and held him or her or me in her jaws, was about to make a feast of it. And then, luckily, that person had the presence of mind, so the account says, not me. So the account says the person had the presence of mind in calling the name of Tara. Tara, where are you? Come, I'm in desperate situation. Or maybe may have even recited the lines. Not the 21 verses. No, not at that time. But maybe one verse, or even in the case of 21 verses, each verse is as powerful as all the words. So it doesn't say which verse they uttered, how it went, but Jamana Savata, they prayed to the Buddha, to Tara, that person. And what happened was, all of a sudden, a female clothed in leaves came out, who seemed to be so courageous, reached out to the tigress and reached for the person in her jaws and then took him with full courage, in the face of which the tigress kind of went, how come? Who is this? So then that person was saved. And then the second is paired with ignorance and elephant. Maybe some of you may know elephant. There are accounts of elephant who are trained, very trained, to the point of really sacrificing their life at the command of their trainer. But sometimes they can go, what do you call, berserk? Yeah, they can go berserk when their instincts are activated. Do you know that account? There is a story in the sutras. The king would call someone, say, train this elephant for me, and some very accomplished trainer would train him or her to the point of really following any command. But then the king, when he reported to the king saying, oh, now I have trained him fully, then the king took him on a ride in the forest, maybe for hunting. All of a sudden, the elephant went berserk. Really berserk, and then threw the king, everyone, and then damaged everything in his way. The king kind of was very annoyed, saying, where is your training? Where is the level of training you said that this elephant had attained? The person was put to task. Then the person said, well, the elephant was not less trained at that time, except that was overwhelmed by his instinct. For an opposite gender. And the king wanted more explanation. And then he said, okay, I will show it to you. Once the elephant was brought back to the palace, then the elephant was calm, once again calm. And then he asked the elephant, commanded the elephant to even walk on live embers. It did, despite feeling the pangs of having to walk on live embers. It followed it. So he said, that's what it is. So anyhow, elephants are used. There are so many ways of using the metaphor of elephant. One way of using is that they have a very thick levels, thick layers of instinct that could take over them at any time. and one of them is that of ignorance. Ignorance. So it says that here it is not speaking of all kinds of elephants, but rather elephant who have not been tamed through the use of through the use of hooks. Elephant who not only have not been trained through the use of hooks, but have also been drunk, intoxicated by maybe it is a custom in early times that they may carry a small kind of a pot filled with some kind of intoxicant at their forehead, and somehow by moving or whatnot, it may have overflowed, and they got the taste of it, and then they kind of indulged in it. That kind of made the situation even worse. So here, elephant is given that kind of a form. So it says that not only they have not yet not received training through the use of hooks, but at the same time, on top of that, they have been intoxicated through these intoxicant drinks, and thus they have become completely overwhelmed, completely become overtaken by their inner instinct of what you call losing the intellect, losing the sight of what to do and what not to do, and thus creates havoc on their way. So that would be a case of a physical threat, unless one keeps away from that, or unless one finds some kind of protection, one could be damaged physically. Likewise is the case with ignorance. When we say ignorance here, it is instead speaking of ignorance with regard to the topics of knowing the topics of what to adopt, what to discard. That line of wisdom is a very crucial wisdom to cultivate. Knowing what is an object to be discarded, what is an object to be obtained. Mainly, we speak of this along the line of virtues to be adopted, non-virtues to be discarded. So kind of recognizing virtues for virtue and non-virtues for non-virtues, and then following up with a what do you call concordant action of either adopting it or discarding it. So when we lose the power of mindfulness in terms of what we are up to, and also lose the power of what we call mental introspection, thereby losing sight of what needs to be adopted, what needs to be discarded. When we lose these two tools of mindfulness and mental introspection, then on our stride, it's very possible that we would be creating damage to ourselves. And this is the work of ignorance, in that we have not honed up our understanding of what we are doing, whether that's what we need to be doing, whether that's what we need to discard right then and not. So when ignorance kind of takes over and the tools of mindfulness and introspection kind of suffer under the weight of ignorance, then we can expect nothing but damages upon ourselves, like in the case of an untrained elephant, or an elephant overtaken by their instinct. So here the story goes like this. There was once a girl who went to gather flower. All of a sudden, a wild elephant came and wound her in his trunk, and then also used his tusks to kind of harm her. At that time, she had the presence of remembering Tara calling on her. And what happened was, all of a sudden, by the power of that, Tara, that elephant transformed. Instead, it began to treat her gently by, instead of harming her, he took her in her trunk and first put her on a stone, on a stone slab, and then eventually took her in a marketplace and put her on a high pedestal, and then eventually into a temple and then put her on a high throne, and eventually to a king's gate, and then there he began to treat the girl respectfully. That all impressed the king, and eventually the king wanted her to be his queen. So, that's second. Now the third is anger or hatred. Anger is likened to the threat of fire. Here, while making case for this, it pictures like this. There is a sweeping storm, a very strong wind, and that strong wind made the fire. There was a fire going, and the wind kind of made it worse, make it bigger. And in the course of that, it burned so many logs, whatnot, and that produced so thick a cloud, so thick a smoke. And in the middle of that force, the trees or the logs had no choice but to get burned. So likewise, it gives this example that likewise this fire can be likened to our hatred, to our anger. In the scriptures, this notion runs through the scriptures. Unlike other afflicted emotions, anger or hatred, I'm using these together, almost like interchangeable, whereas in the Western context, these are two different things, right? But I'm doing that deliberately because of how it is used in the Buddhist scriptures. So when I say anger or when I say hatred, please understand that I'm not saying, I do not mean anger, I do not mean hatred. I'm just joking. Yeah, it is quite complex, right? Given that you understand them as different. And it seems like they are different, yet in the Buddhist scriptures, they are referred to almost like interchangeable. So, yet they are not so far off from what we understand as anger or hatred. A kind of a sense of, sense of resentment, sense of disliking others. So in the scriptures, this notion runs through, in that unlike other afflictions like jealousy, greed, attachment, malice, etc., anger or hatred has additional, negative, destructive quality. Pardon? Yes, compared to the other seven. Yeah, in this context, we could say compared to the other seven. Although, along with anger or hatred, from a Buddhist perspective, wrong view also has as strong a destructive element, additional to their being afflicted in the first place. So what their destruction amounts to is just as fire, when it is blown by wind, in whatever direction it is, it will burn whatever comes in its way. Likewise, anger or hatred is said to have this additional destructive power of consuming, of undoing any positive karma, any positive action one may have engaged in, if that is not dedicated, if that is not already earmarked. It's like living. You have made so much effort in gathering something, some grains, crops, but you have forgotten to lock the place. So anyone could come and then take it away. So that's how we say it is very important to dedicate, to earmark whatever positive action one may have engaged in. Once we do that, then it becomes out of reach of anger. So that's why in the Buddhist practice we say there are two things to remember. In any virtuous action that you engage in, there are two things to remember. One thing that happens in the beginning, one that happens in the end. The first thing in the beginning is motivation. Make sure that you have the right motivation, because that will determine the quality of what you engage in. And then at the end, supposing that one has done a good job in coming up with the pure motivation of helping others, at least not harming others. And with that kind of a motivation, one has gone about gathering stones, gathering trees, or writing a letter, whatever it may be, or going out in the forest, whatever. If one has done that with that kind of a motivation to begin with, and that kind of sustains it, then the activity, every movement, every step would be considered virtuous. But then towards the end of it, before anger can ruin it, when one is about to conclude that and move on to another phase, then before anger can ruin it, undo it, one has to dedicate it. Dedicate it for, say, in the most ideal way of dedicating is that may this be a cause for becoming fully awakened Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. May this be a cause for the world to become a better place for everyone to live in. May this be a cause for everyone's anger to calm down, etc. So that's how here anger or hatred is likened to that of a fire, and that the fire, when it is blown by wind, strong wind, and then kind of burns the trees in its way, could even produce so thick, blinding smoke, in the midst of which the trees or the forest of virtue could be burned. So likewise, it makes this case that likewise in our internal world also, anger or hatred is such that it is fed by wrong mentation or false mentation, whatever it means. It's misconstrued thoughts, false thoughts, miscalculated thoughts can serve as a fuel for anger to arise. Yes, when anger arises, we would have miscalculated something. Oh, that was done to harm me. Or how dare he? I am this great. How could he do this? So some kind of a thought would have gone into our mind which would have fueled anger. So the wind is likened to the false mentation. False, false mentation, not meditation. False mentation. I heard myself saying meditation. So false mentation, false thought kind of fuels it. And then in the midst in the midst of being gripped by the anger, there is the possibility, even probability, of thick smoke like unbecoming actions coming out, be that of speech or that of action. And in the midst of that, in the frenzy of that, then there is no chance for virtues to ever stand its ground. Even the virtues that one has accumulated before could be consumed by it. But right at that very moment, there's no room for virtues to arise. So destructive is this fire-like anger. So then the account is, there was once a householder who at night was attacked by an enemy who was bent on taking revenge on him. When he saw that, then he ran, but somehow the person who was bent on taking revenge kind of outran him and got hold of him. How he was in danger. All of a sudden he had the presence of mind in calling on Tara. Oh, I thought, what is it? Yeah, so someone bent on taking revenge came at night, attacked him, and burned his house. So he tried to run out, and he could not. All of a sudden, he had the presence of mind in calling on Tara, and then what happened was, out of nowhere, thick smoke, a thick cloud began to build up over his house. And then strong torrents of rain came down. All of a sudden, the fire was what? Yeah, the fire was doused, and he escaped. But in all these accounts, the very important thing is to remember the destructiveness of the inner threat. Now the fourth one is jealousy. Jealousy is likened to the threat of a snake's attack. Snakes, what they do, they kind of hide in dark, thick thickets, dark places. And when somebody comes, they would jump and attack them, spread them with their venom, and then bring about destruction to them. Likewise is jealousy. Jealousy is such that when we succumb to it, we wouldn't first see it coming. Very often it would be hidden within us, unless and until we kind of warn ourselves of it. It could be lurking within us. And as soon as we see someone else doing well and prospering, whatnot, unless we guard ourselves against this tendency of unwarrantedly jealous of them, this tendency of jealousy could lurk out, and then not tolerate the prosperity of others. And then once we give in to this, then this would almost serve like a venom that has spread within our mental realm, in that the whole mental landscape would be filled with it. And then, although to begin with it was jealousy, but then in the wake of that spreading, it could then give rise to so many other ills also. And the account goes, we are halfway through it. Let's see. So the account goes, there was once a prostitute who was going to meet a very wealthy merchant who owned so many, so many amounts, stores of toshel, it could be pearls or diamonds or whatnot. But then, unfortunately, on the way, she was attacked by a venomous snake, which kind of curled around her, and she was almost choked to death. All of a sudden, she called out to Tara. What happened was, all of a sudden, the snake that was curling around her turned into a flower garland. And it remained so for the next 7 days. I don't know what happened after that. Yeah, it doesn't say, but surely if she had 7 days and with the flowers, she would have definitely made herself comfortable in kind of putting it somewhere and walking and going her business, right? So it should have ended well. Now the fifth one. The fifth one is tangen. Tangen is wrong view. Wrong view. When we say wrong view, it can come in so many forms. Wrong view of seeing ourselves as being permanent. Wrong view of seeing ourselves as superior than others. Wrong view of seeing others' ways as inferior to oneself. Jikta Tarta. And then, of course, there is this more subtle wrong view in terms of seeing ourselves in a state that is inconcordant with the reality. Basically, seeing ourselves as objectively real, as intrinsically objectively real. But that's more subtle kind of a wrong view. What else? Yeah. And then, yes, there is this more, I mentioned it earlier, there's one more instance of wrong view in that it kind of denies the validity of the law of causality, kind of denying the law of causality in the sense that, anything goes, and also saying, behaving well or taming one's mental afflictions will promote one's prosperity. Indulging in anger, jealousy, greed, etc. Can harm one's prosperity, one's mental well-being. Kind of denying that. There would be kind of denying the law of causality, the order of causality. Kind of saying that just anything goes. It's kind of giving into cheap relativism. On the one hand, one is saying everything is relative, that's good, but stretching it too far, saying everything goes, right? So that's kind of giving into cheap relativism. So those are considered wrong views. And this kind of wrong view is likened to a thief. A thief will move around being a threat to the stability, to the safety of others, irrespective of where that person is, be that in an open space or in a neighborhood, whatnot. The mere presence of that would disturb the safety of that area. And then would bring a trail of destruction to their families, to the monasteries, etc. Likewise, giving in to these wrong views can bring about a trail of destruction in one's mental attitudes and the follow-up actions. So the story goes that there was a place by the name of Barukatsa where a great merchant had big wealth. In those times, wealth was counted, measured along the lines of how many camels you have, how many horses you have, right? So that person owned 1,000 camels, 500 best bred horses, and he was making a caravan of it, moving from one place to another. All of a sudden, in a remote place, humans, but who were cannibals, a horde of them just ambushed him, and he, not only they would take his possessions, but his life was in danger. Luckily, he had the presence of calling on to Tara. All of a sudden, from nowhere, even greater army of warriors came up and overpowered those thieves, and they were driven away. Now the sixth is jealousy. Jealousy is likened to iron chain. Iron chain, yeah. Pardon? No. Also, you're right. I'm looking at Tibetan text, not English text. So my brain is not. Yeah. The sixth is serna. Serna is miserliness. Sorry, jealousy was already done. Yeah, jealousy was snake. Oh yes. So miserliness is likened to chakto, iron chain. Mrs. Sibe Chutongkang Rawaru Lichen Rawa Meper Ching Ching Sepe Kocha Yeke Chubai Sene Chakto this miserliness is explained in the sense that you may have many possessions, whatnot, but you are kind of narcissistic, and you are kind of miserly, very attached to them, to the point that you are not even willing to utilize them for your own sake. It's almost like this miserliness is binding you from enjoying this wealth, either for oneself or others. So it is likened to that of a iron chain. And Mrs. Sibet Zonggang Rawalu, Luchen Rawa Mepra Ching Ching. The background story is given like this. The background story, not the account, is given like this. Samsara is likened to a prison to which the sentient beings are without power, without any freedom, kind of bound to it. And the attachment, which is the root attachment, which is the root fuel for miserliness, kind of serves like a strong, almost unopenable lock to which the miserliness, the iron chain of miserliness is attached. So that's the background, what do you call, scenario given here. So then the account here is there was a ringleader of thief who eventually succeeded in making into the king's treasure. And what happened was, he was so lost in the treasures. So say, this. All of a sudden, he came upon a pot filled with alcohol, beer, whatever can intoxicate you. Here, the term used is chang. Chang is the Tibetan breed of Tibetan alcohol breed. Yeah. So, but when he came upon that, he could not help but drink it. When he drank it, he became completely drunk and he was asleep the whole night. And then the next morning when he woke up, the king's people saw him. Oh, they held him. They tied him with the iron chain and gave him a good solid beating. And then, luckily, despite being ringleader of Thebe, he remembered Tara. Tara, at least, although I didn't do good and I don't do good, but please help me. Maybe there is a chance for me to change. What happened was, all of a sudden, a bird came. Very beautiful bird. Bird came, and the bird opened the lock, and he was released. But then he felt grateful to Tara, and then when we went back to his own groups, then he changed them. He said, no, now we should change. And then they were all they all returned to doing social work. Yeah, in the text it says they all returned to accumulating merit and abandoning negativities. I guess they did social work. Well, whatever wealth they had kept with them, they must have released them for social use. I think so. That's how they may have accumulated merit. I think so. So the seven is attachment. Attachment is likened to water, strong torrent of water. Okay, so miserliness is one manifestation, or a kind of one way of attachment crystallizing into one particular form, kind of attachment towards one's possessions, kind of going in one direction, and crystallizing into miserliness, in that one not only is attached, but one is also not willing to utilize it for fear that it might be exhausted. Whereas one may have attachment, and then by the fuel attachment, one could then be driven to kind of accumulate more and whatnot, and whatnot. But here, the seventh is attachment, which is likened to water. The background scenario is the typical one in the Buddhist scriptures. It says the samsara is likened to an ocean, a very deep, wide ocean, which is difficult to cross over. And on top of that, one cannot force oneself into a particular direction, because one is then driven into opposite direction every time by the strong wind or by the strong storm. Is strong enough? By the strong hurricane of action, one's own karma drives the person in opposite direction, thus never get to the shore. And in the meantime, being in the ocean deep enough, that person is every now and then beaten by ocean animals, including crocodile and others, even sharks. And these are likened to the sufferings of old age, illness, eventually death. So such is the threat of water, damage that water can cause. And this is likened to the damage internally caused by indulgence in attachment, that it could kind of hold us, hold us and keep us from making any progress. In that it's almost like getting stuck, like one is trying to move, but one's hands are filled with adhesives or glues, that one gets stuck, right? So likewise, attachment does the same, in that one fails to kind of make spiritual progress. Oh, the account is so long. Okay. Yeah, here again the story has to do with water, water or ocean, where some 3 groups of merchants went to venture into the ocean in search of precious stones, in search of Rinpoche, in search of precious stones like corals and others. But they, in the middle of it, they were consumed by attachment, in that they were not contented with their first haul. They went back for the second haul. That disturbed the spirits guarding those precious stones, and they they created strong storm that kind of almost drowned them. And the people there tried their hard in calling so many different names, maybe Dadul, Namgyal, like that, but didn't help. They called Geshe, Dadul, Namgyal, nothing helped. But eventually someone said, oh no, how about calling Tara? Yes, Tara, please come to our help. What happened was the storms kind of calmed down. All the three boats, all the three steamers, all the 3 ships, yes, in those times, all the 3 ships could cross the ocean in just one day and were grounded in a safety place. Last one. This is unusual for me to finish. what I intended to say, even today also. Okay? The last one is afflicted doubt. Not just doubt per se, but afflicted doubt. Doubt that is leaning more to wrong decision. Usually doubt is something to be entertained, so that one could then pursue in search of the truth. But then sometimes doubt, we may start out with doubt, but it could be, it could be stained by some deeper affliction, a sense of harming someone, a sense of resentment or whatnot. So the doubt may not have really come out from a fresh, clear ground, but rather could be brewing out from a stained, already afflicted ground. So then the doubt very possibly can lead to wrong decision, harmful decision, wrongful decision. So that kind of afflicted doubt, even in the Buddhist psychology also, we do make a distinction between doubt per se and afflicted doubt. afflicted in the sense that such doubts are accompanied by or associated with an affliction, tainted by them. So this kind of afflicted doubt is likened to harmful spirit. Likened to harmful spirit. We use the term shasa. Literally, it means meat eater, but it refers to what you usually call ghost, but not quite what you use the term ghost for. Maybe not. Or maybe there can be some very harmful, malevolent ghost also. So here it is referring to malevolent ghost. Malevolent ghost that can create harm in your path to spiritual awakening. So one has to beware of afflicted doubt. One may, it may, assume a form of being justified curiosity, justifies curiosity, justified doubt to begin with. But unless we thoroughly check it, it could be rooted in, it could be steeped in kind of an affliction, and in which case then it can be very harmful more particularly in one's cultivation of positivities, in one's cultivation of spiritual awakening. Thus it can be a hurdle to one's to use this term here, to one's effort to attain liberation from the afflictions. Because rooted as it is in afflictions, the more one indulges in it, the more one pursues it, the more steeped one becomes in the affliction. And that means dragging one's feet even deeper into the ocean of samsara, into the ocean of afflictions, rather than kind of helping us inching in to liberation. Doubt, which is giving in to nihilism. One is tending more to negating things. One is tending more to. One starts out not afresh. One starts with an agenda, already an agenda that yes, it ought to end this way. Now let me search. Then it would go this way. So kind of starting out with a what do you call bias towards nihilism, and then doing the research. Oh, very often we can see that, right, in researches also. Oh, have to be very careful. That's what I meant. Exactly, in researches, right? Yes, please. Pardon? Despair, isn't that hopelessness? Right, but not quite that, not quite that. But yeah, the research has to be very objective. Sometimes people start out, before embarking on the research, they would have an idea. It ought to end here. You pursue it, right? That happens so much time. That happens. So that's what I meant. You could start out with, oh, what happens if we do like this? But you want it to go this way, right? And then the more you go it, the more bias it becomes. So that's what it meant. So when we give into this, then this could create harm to our lifeline to liberation, to our prospect of receiving liberation from the afflicted emotions. I think it's good to leave this open here, because Tibetans have a belief to leave something so that it could serve as an omen for yet another session, or like this. Well, what it is, I mean, I see people interested. What it is there is a place, there is a temple where there was a group of monks, and with the passage of days, the numbers of them dwindled, and they were wondering what was happening, and they later figured out that yes, outside there was a big, harmful spirit that was getting them one by one by one. And then eventually one of the novices went out, and he also likewise was grabbed by this harmful spirit and was almost being devoured by him with his pangs piercing into his head. Then, even in that desperate situation, he called out to Tara, like this. And what happened was, all of a sudden, a black, as fearful, even more fierceful goddess black turned out with a sword this long, maybe this long, and then kind of did like this. Didn't hit, but kind of made the gesture of really hitting. That really scared even that harmful spirit. And the harmful spirit really felt regretful, and he all of a sudden reached out to something. What happened? What turned out to be a iron pot filled with pearls, and he made an offering to the novice, saying, "I'm so sorry." With this, I'm so sorry for taking a longer time. Yes.